They do have a timeout. Decide not to use it. Curry, way downtown. Bang! Bang! Oh, what a shot from Curry!
Okay, guys, y'all know that I pride myself on answering as many of your questions as I possibly can. And while it's extremely hard for me to go down to every single video's comment section and find every single comment and answer it, what I can do instead is what we've been doing for pretty much the past month, I want to say. And every single time I upload a video, we do it as a premiere. And through the course of the video, I'm just hanging out in the live chat. That way I can go through, I can answer every single one of your questions, and it's been a ton of fun. So if you have any questions that you would like to be answered, now you can leave them in the comment section, and I can try my best to get to them. But realistically, the chances of that happening are unlikely. Whereas if you go out and if you just make sure that you are subscribed to the channel, but more importantly, have that bell hit next to the subscribe button. That way you can come out to the premieres. That's how you can guarantee that you get your question answered. Or also, whenever I make these type of videos, what I'm always going to be doing is I'm going to be sending out a tweet saying, hey, reply to this tweet with any fantasy basketball questions that you have. And then I will 100% feature it in the video. So you're going to see a question that came from Twitter on this one as well. But yeah, outside of those announcements, all I have to say is drop a like, subscribe, leave a comment, and let's get into it. So our first question that we are going to have is coming out from Abby White. And this is a little bit intriguing because I've been talking about trying to trade away Karl Anthony Towns as of late. And I know a lot of people have not agreed with me. And I think your concerns are valid in that I am saying there's a chance that Karl Anthony Towns, based on everything that has happened to him this year, and I know I said I wasn't going to get into this just because I thought everybody knew what happened, but Karl Anthony Towns, A, plays for the worst team in basketball, B, had his head coach fired, more importantly though, C, got COVID himself, and D, his mother got COVID and passed away from COVID this year. So with all of those things stacking up, I was viewing it as, you know what, Karl Anthony Towns really, I think once we get down the stretch at the very end of the year, there's a chance that he doesn't play back-to-backs. There's a chance that some road trips, maybe he doesn't make. Maybe he just has quote-unquote back soreness, stays home, deals with his own personal life. But this trade that Abby is asking is trade Jayson Tatum for Karl Anthony Towns. And as of now, I mean, Cat is severely outproducing Jayson Tatum. Tatum, another player that has suffered COVID, and reports are saying that Tatum has still not fully recovered. And like I've give this disclaimer all the time, I have no idea what's going on. I mean, I am not a doctor. I think that most doctors don't even fully understand what's going on with this virus. But if reports are coming out saying, hey, Jayson Tatum is kind of having issues with his stamina. Jayson Tatum still isn't fully back to where he was before he contracted it. Maybe it was just an excuse for the Boston Celtics kind of being a disappointing team over the past few weeks. Maybe it's valid. Regardless, what we can look at is we can look at the fact that Karl Anthony Towns has been severely outproducing Jayson Tatum. And while obviously Tatum's a player that we're going to be expecting to play close to every single game during the fantasy basketball playoffs, and we don't have any of those concerns, we have to ask ourselves, are we going to be going and rolling the dice for that elite production in Karl Anthony Towns, or are we just going to take the great production with more games in Jayson Tatum? And I think when the difference between these two players is so large, I think we should go with Karl Anthony Towns. It's definitely close. Abby, thank you for leaving this question in the comment section. Now, of course, if you have your own opinion on what side you think should be taken in this deal, go down there and let Abby know. I am sure they would love to hear it. Okay, so now our next question is going to be coming out from Twitter, and this is from John. And he's asking us, do we want Kevin Durant or Sabonis in a points league rest of season? So I'll say a couple things here. I really appreciate whenever y'all ask your questions and you include if it's a point or a category league format, because that is going to change the answer a good amount, because we understand that there are major differences in fantasy basketball between those category leagues and those point leagues. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I recently made a video over this just a few days ago. So thank you for leaving that comment. And I'll say, if this was a category league, I'm not even thinking about this. I'm going, you know what? I don't care about injury concerns. I don't care about load management concerns. We are going with Kevin Durant. But with it being a points league, we know that a big thing that gives Kevin Durant so much value is his incredibly high efficiency. So if you go, it's a points league, efficiency doesn't matter, then at that point you have to really look into it. I will say a few things here. I know a lot of people just naturally want to say that Kevin Durant, there's no way he's going to be playing back-to-backs once we get into the fantasy basketball playoffs, that he's always going to be having to miss a few games every single week. And I'll say, I understand that thought process, but at the same time, I think that the quote-unquote injury he is suffering right now may be more so just load management, very similar to what we saw with LeBron a few seasons ago. And I think Kevin Durant may be going, you know what? It's going to be better on my body if we just sit out for a few weeks. And then once we get in the stretch of things, once we get in the heat of the back half of the schedule, then we can go out there, we can turn it on, we can ramp it up, we can get into peak physical condition, and we can make sure that we are rolling for the playoffs, because we know that this Nets team, I mean, I don't want to say it's finals or bust, but at least it's finals appearance or bust. I mean, they've gone all in. They don't have draft picks for like the next 8 years. So I think that Kevin Durant is actually going to be playing a surprisingly amount of games during the fantasy basketball playoffs compared to what most people would expect. And you also look at the fact that the Nets play 4 games during that stretch. Then you go, okay, you know what? Kevin Durant is actually probably a league winner. I know changing this to a points league format rather than a category league loses a ton of value in what Kevin Durant is bringing, because he's elite from his field goal percentage and he's elite with his free throw percentage. But still, I mean, I think we go Kevin Durant here. It's going to be close. Please let me know what y'all think in the comments section. Now, I know Sabonis is a little bit of the safer answer, and this is very similar to the question that we got previously, and this is kind of what makes fantasy basketball a lot more complicated than fantasy football, and that in fantasy football, you don't have to worry about this. You don't have to worry this far out. But here, the overarching question is, are you going to want the player that is definitely going to be averaging more points per game, and you are going to be a little bit worried about how many games he is going to get in? Or are you going to want the player that's 100% going to play more games, but his ceiling isn't quite at the same level? And I think for these two differences that we have, we go with the player that we know that his points per game is going to be a little bit higher, even if we don't necessarily have the guaranteed in the games played. All right, so now our next question is going to be coming from our newest video that we ripped from the comment section. And this is going to be from High Society, and he's asking us, is it time that we look to trade Michael Porter Jr.? And y'all know Michael Porter Jr. is someone that we've talked about over and over and over and over again on this channel, and that's because Michael Porter Jr. is one of the most polarizing players in all of basketball, not just fantasy basketball, but also in the NBA. And here I'll say, it's not time to trade Michael Porter Jr. yet. One of the big reasons you have him on your roster is going, okay, this Nuggets team, quite possibly, they are just one piece away from being serious title contenders. Quite possibly, Michael Porter Jr. is not that player yet. So we know he has a ton of trade value. We know that he is actually eligible for a giant extension after this season. So this front office is going to be asked with a serious question. Hey, what are we doing with Michael Porter Jr.? Are we going to be signing him for the long term? And for those reasons, I think that there's an outside chance that Michael Porter Jr. is actually traded before the NBA trade deadline. So what I would prefer to do is, if your fantasy basketball trade deadline is after the NBA trade deadline, then I want to hold on to Michael Porter Jr. for now. I want to see if there's any chance that he's going to get moved off the Nuggets. We know that also, I mean, his personality isn't supposedly meshing extremely well with everybody else on the team. So if Porter Jr. is traded to another team where his usage rate increases, he's playing a little bit less off ball, and maybe he's able to bring the ball up slightly, maybe we get to see a bump up in not only his field goal attempts per game, but also his assist numbers. I think that he has all the ceiling in the world. The problem is, I mean, obviously he's playing on a team that's run through Jokic. Obviously he's playing on a team that their second option is not going to be him. So I'll go, yes, there will be a point to trade Michael Porter Jr., but that point is going to come after the NBA trade deadline if he finds himself still in Denver. All right, so now our last question that we are going to bring up is coming out from Apes, and this was also from the YouTube comment section. So like I said, guys, feel free to leave any comments you have with your trade questions. Just, I would advise you to come out to those premieres, because in those premieres, I'm able to answer way more questions. But anyway, this question, I just thought that was kind of funny. It's, should I trade Jayson Tatum or Brandon Ingram for Russell Westbrook in a points format? And now Westbrook, another player that we have talked a ton about as of late, and we've talked about him specifically in that in a category league, you never want Westbrook on your team. With how bad his efficiency is, I mean, you would pretty much have to punt free throws, you'd have to punt field goal percentage, and you would have to punt turnovers for him to make an impact to your roster. But in a points league format where the volume is going to be ridiculous with his points scored, rebounds, and assists, really, he's going to be a much better option in those leagues. But with Westbrook, we can say a couple things here. One, I mean, injury concerns are real. Westbrook has been a player that has had to deal with this over and over and over again, and this is due to the fact that, I mean, he has had a historically high usage rate compared to pretty much any other player in the NBA throughout time. If you look at his last few years in Oklahoma, I mean, that just completely took everything out of him. So we'll always have to worry about injuries with Westbrook, and because of that, the games played, they're not going to be nearly as high of the games played from Jayson Tatum and Brandon Ingram. And on the flip side of this, at the same time, I mean, Ingram and Tatum are still great options in points leagues. I mean, they're right up there with Westbrook in how many points they're going to be scoring per game. You don't have the injury concerns, and on top of that, we know Ingram and Tatum, they're a lot younger. They're going to be playing back-to-backs. And there's an outside shot with Brandon Ingram that this is a team that quite possibly moves on from Lonzo Ball. Lonzo Ball, another player that's going to be a restricted free agent this offseason. So the team has to ask themselves, hey, are we going to be willing to give Lonzo that long-term contract? Because we know that there are not that many great free agents hitting the market, and a lot of teams have the cap space. So Lonzo is going to demand a significant contract. So he could also be a player on the move, which, if that happened, Brandon Ingram would see a bump up in his usage rate. I know we are also going to see a lot of point Zion, but still, that would be really impactful for Brandon Ingram and the rest of his season's projections. But regardless, let me just end it here saying no, please hold on to both Brandon Ingram and Jayson Tatum. Do not trade them for Russell Westbrook, even though Westbrook is a much better option in a points league than a category format. So I like the idea here in that you're making sure you are playing to your format, but still, I think you're just giving up too much value. Now, thank you guys. I really hope y'all enjoyed this video. Now, as always, go down there, drop a like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. It helps us out a ton. And yeah, if you want to make sure that your questions are going to be answered going forward, go follow us on Twitter, follow us on Instagram, shoot us some DMs there, and I'll try to include them in the video.